All right, this is take 2 of part 2 of me trying to see what happens when I leave my water pump running on my pond all winter long, and then trying to fix the problems as they come along. That's not the title of this video, that's just what I'm doing here. So anyways, with that intro out of the way, we've been having temperatures over the past week or so, varying from 9 degrees Fahrenheit up to like the mid 20 degrees Fahrenheit, and we've been getting that pretty consistently. So in the previous part of this series, which is only going to be a 2-part series, part 1, I showed that I was ending it on putting this aquarium heater right here in front of these rocks. Now, I want to reiterate that the heater is not to increase the temperature of the pond. It's 150 watts will never do that. That is simply just there in that particular spot to stop ice from forming on the surface near these rocks, which would inhibit the water flow between them. It's never going to change the temperature of the pond. Maybe by 1 to 2 degrees at the most, if anything. However, that aquarium heater is not working properly. If I take it out of the pond and put it in the house and warm it up under some warm water, I'll plug it in, turns on just fine. But as soon as I put it out here, even if I already have it pre-warmed and put it under water, it shuts itself off within a few minutes. I feel like I need to address something here that some people might be asking, is you're probably saying, why are you worrying about the ice damming here when you have the rocks in the way that would cause that to happen? Well, these rocks are here for a purpose. They're not just placed there for aesthetics. So in order to actually draw debris that rides on the surface of the water of a pond or a pool, because a pool skimmer functions the same way, what you need to actually do is have narrow gaps for water to flow between, I should say the surface water. So if you have a gap that's kind of like this and opens up near the top, that's kind of how the rocks are sitting there, there's going to be more water flowing near the surface up in this area than down below. So that increases the, it's like drag almost, like there's surface tension on the water and you're dragging, you're kind of like, imagine there's a tarp laying on top of the water and it has debris on it and you're pulling on the tarp and you drag all the debris with it. That's kind of how that works. So you have fast moving water between these gaps here and up near the surface, and that's drawing all the debris into the intake bay. If that wasn't there, if those rocks weren't there, the water would be moving really slowly in this direction, and a lot of the debris wouldn't want to move over to this area to stay here to be cleaned out. It would just sit on the surface of the water and eventually just sink before it can actually move over to here. When that happens, you get more buildup on the bottom, more stuff to clean out, more algae will build up because they have more organics breaking down in the water. So that's the whole purpose of these being here. I'm not going to remove those, it would be too much work. And it takes a long time to kind of fit and angle all these rocks into place like a puzzle piece. And removing those would be just a pain. So I think I've said enough for this segment of this video here. And then I'll bring out the thermometer after I put the new heater in there. And we'll see if it has any effect on the water, at least in the immediate area, to see the temperature change. And then we'll also test in other spots as well. It's currently 20 degrees, and it's been pretty much 20 degrees all day long, Fahrenheit. I feel like I need to keep saying that because most people on YouTube seem to talk in Celsius, but this is America, and that's just what they use. I would prefer the full metric system myself, but I was born into it. Anyway, so here's what it looks like here. There was actually snow on this area this morning, too, and it just keeps melting. As a matter of fact, there's not even any ice there anymore. Even in this cold temperature, it's still continuously melting. The waterfall is still flowing. Here's what this area looks like over here by the rocks. So there's just a tiny bit of ice right up there, but it's thin. Most of the stuff below there is just continuously flowing through, and that part there. And from what I can tell, the water level has not dropped. I think it's been a week now or more, and it seems like it's maintaining a water level, so we're not losing any water up there, as I've talked about before, for other reasons. So anyways, I got this thermometer here. This is basically an Insta-read thermometer. Now, I have tested this before in different parts of the pond. So I've tested here in the inflow, I've tested out the waterfall, I've tested over there. The temperature, there is no temperature difference. This water is cycling pretty quickly through the pond, so it doesn't really have time to really have any like hot or cold spots or anything like that. It's all circulating. The only difference would be down near the bottom, but for the most part, the top 18 inches and across all the surface and up top in the bog area, all the same temperature. Looks like 32.2 degrees Fahrenheit. So if we had a really cold temperature drop all of a sudden, say if it went down to like 10 degrees for 2 days, it's possible that this could freeze over, at least on the surface. All right, so I'm gonna put the heater right down here. Currently, this is the aquarium heater, and it is not working. And that way we'll see tomorrow if this area doesn't have any ice anymore, because it's the same temperature as, it's going to be the same temperature tomorrow as it's been for the past couple days, pretty much. Same averages anyways. All right, it is the next morning here, and it's currently 13 degrees Fahrenheit, and it was that last night, so it's been 13 degrees for many hours now. Water is still flowing. Waterfall is doing just fine. Haven't lost any water, so there's no ice damming going on there or up in the bog area up there. And then down here where the heater is, which I know it's working because I put the thermometer down there and made sure it was hot, but it is down below and not up near the surface, and there's actually still surface ice forming right where I put it underneath there. I didn't break this away. This was like this. So it's actually formed more ice in the top. So at this temperature outside, it's not melting anything above it. However, it's possible that the water temperature could be affected, and we'll test that later on today in the evening. So you can see here that the ice is melted up around this area and around there. There is not really, you can see there's actually some bubbles coming off of the heater right there, so you can see it's actually working. But there's not really a significant amount of melt in this one spot where the heater is sitting, and that's partly because the water is just flowing past it this way. But it's melted all around the edge over there, and quite a bit over here and over there. And as I said before, we started out this morning at 13 degrees Fahrenheit, and it only briefly got up to 25 degrees Fahrenheit today. Now it's back down to 20. So it's currently only 20 degrees Fahrenheit outside right now. And I mean, there's barely any ice forming anywhere, even by the waterfall, and everything's melting. So I have a feeling that is having an effect on it. The only way to know for sure if this is actually warming the water up enough to do that overall is to basically just leave it on for days at this point. Now, we are supposed to have more snow coming pretty soon, and also more temperature drops, such as in the lower teens. So if the temperature continues to increase in the water, I'll know that it's actually working. So here is the temperature outside right now. Here's the temperature of the water. So we actually went up by a full degree. I really don't believe that was the sun, because there's a lot of volume of water in here. It would have taken a lot more energy to increase it by a full degree, especially when it's covered in ice and snow. So we're at 33.3. So overnight, if that temperature goes up even more, we'll know if the heater is actually responsible for increasing the water temperature and not the sun. Okay, it's the next morning here, and it has been 12 degrees Fahrenheit for about 12 hours now. And it's really hard to say if the temperature has actually went up or down in the water. I mean, to me, it looks like it went down, because these areas here that were melted before have a very thin layer of ice that froze over, except for the spot over there where the aerator is on the far side. 32.2. So yeah, it looks like it's went down by a whole degree since last night, after 12 hours, roughly 12 hours. So it's really difficult to say, because it is so cold, and it's been so cold out here for so long, if that heater / de-icer is having any effect on the water temperature. Now, I think it's supposed to be cloudy today, and we're supposed to get some snow. So I'll have to come back and test maybe later this evening and see if the temperature has gone up, because it isn't supposed to get warm at all. It's only supposed to be up to 20 degrees Fahrenheit, maybe peaking out at maybe 24, 25 degrees today. As long as the sun isn't shining on the pond here, I'll have a more accurate representation to see if that heater's actually having an effect. Even if this heater / de-icer is going to have an effect on the water temperature, there's not going to be a plot twist here in this little experiment, or observation, I should call it. I'm not going to leave the heater on continuously to see how warm the water can get. I might do that maybe in the future, but not for this particular video. One reason is because it's just a waste of electricity. Another reason is because if it was to continuously warm the water up, I don't want it to have any effect on the wildlife in the pond, the fish and the frogs and everything. The frogs are in hibernation. I don't want it to throw off the cycle if it was to get too warm. Because this video is about seeing if I can leave the pump running in the pond all winter without the aid of a heater. I guess if I really wanted to warm this pond up, I wouldn't use a 250 watt heater. I'd probably go with 500 or 1,000 watt. But that's not the idea. And if I really wanted to make sure it would stay de-iced, what I would do is I wouldn't put it underwater and let it sit near the bottom like it is. What I would do is I would take a float. I would just take a piece of styrofoam, carve out the center of it, and then put that so it's just below the water surface, below the float. And then that will keep the surface ice from forming. And I would just leave it in the same spot somewhere over here to make sure it wouldn't ice dam. So anyways, I will come back later this evening and we'll test the water temperature again, and we'll see if it's having any effect on the water temperature. All right, it is now late afternoon, same day, and the temperature is currently 23 degrees Fahrenheit, so we've went up quite a bit from this morning. And I can tell that the water temperature is increased because the ice is melting over here in this spot, and a little bit over here. It's not really melted per se, it's thinner, and then there's a little tiny spot right there where it's melted. So here is the temperature of the water, and it is 32.7 degrees Fahrenheit. So we went up about a half a degree since this morning. So what that tells me is that yesterday when the sun was out all day, the sun definitely did have an effect on the water temperature. But it wasn't solely just the sun, and it wasn't solely just the warmer down in the water there. It was a combination of both. Because the conditions today are basically the same as they were yesterday and the day before, as far as the temperatures go and everything, and the wind and stuff like that. So the sun by itself, I would say, increased it about a half a degree, and the warmer itself probably increased it by a half a degree. Now I say probably because there is a chance that the ground temperature itself, because the ground is in contact with this whole pond, this is in the ground, as well as the bog area up there, which is also 2 feet deep in the ground. The ground does retain a certain amount of heat, and it's possible that that could have increased the water temperature by itself and not the warmer. Now, the best way to test this is basically to shut off that warmer at this point and see if we see the same temperature increase on the following day, so tomorrow or tomorrow morning, probably tomorrow morning and in the evening as well. We'll take temperatures because the weather is supposed to be roughly the same. It's not going to go really above freezing or above the water temperature anyways. And then we'll know for sure if the warmer is actually warming the water or if the ground is still has some residual warmth to it. All right, it is still the same day and the same temperature, but it is a few hours later. I figured I would give the pond a little while to stabilize in temperature after I turned off the de-icer or warmer, whatever you want to call it. So we're going to check the pond temperature here and see what it is so we can establish a baseline, because throughout the entire night tonight, from now until morning, so about 12-13 hours from now, the temperature is not supposed to change at all. It's going to be consistent around 23 degrees Fahrenheit, which is what it is right now. So let's take a look at the temperature here, and it looks like it has actually went down by just a little bit. So it was 32.7 before, now it's 32.4. So that is a little bit telling. The fact that it's already went down a little bit after the warmer was off, but you know, there's a lot of ice and stuff in this pond here, and it's going to take a while for things to kind of change. But if it does go down more in the morning, or it doesn't change at all, then I know that the warmer is actually warming the water slightly. But as I've said before, that 250 watts is not enough to really do much to the temperature of the water. But maybe if it was going to change the temperature at all, it'd be minimal by maybe 1 or 2 degrees at the most, and that seems to be what's going on. All right, it is now the next morning, and that's about 12 hours later. The temperature outside is still the same as it was after I went to bed, or I should say before I went to bed. And it looks like to me that it's possible the water temperature might be around the same, but the water level has dropped.
and I can tell because the intake bay, the water is flowing over a little rock right here, and it's closer to that rock. In other words, it's almost up near the surface, poking through. And I can tell over here, like these little holes here that I showed last night, the ice is no longer touching the water. The water level is now below that. So I know there's no ice damming forming here. The water is probably overflowing up there somewhere, and I haven't looked at that in a while. So there's probably an ice dam forming somewhere up in this area where the water spews out, which I've shown before. I'll have to look at that later, but it has dropped, which looks like to be about a half an inch. And we also got about an inch of snow last night. So enough talk. Let's take a look at the temperature of the water. All right, so it looks like it went down to about 32.2 degrees. It's kind of hovering between 32.2 and 32.4. Yeah, but that tells me that the heater was definitely having an effect on the water temperature, but as I originally predicted, only very slightly. So what I'm going to do right now to possibly mitigate the issue of the ice damming forming up there is I'm going to turn that heater back on, because this sucks in the warmer water and spits out up there. So maybe by the time I come home later on this evening, that will actually maybe have melted whatever's going on up there. All right, it is now late afternoon, and it doesn't appear the pond's lost any more water. Really kind of hard to say, but it doesn't seem like it's any lower than it was this morning. And not that it matters at this point, but I'm going to go ahead and just test the temperature of the water. It's currently 30 degrees outside, so it's the warmest it's been in quite a while. I wouldn't call that warm, but yeah, so it looks like the temperature of the water is right around 33 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's went up quite a bit since this morning, since I plugged the heater back in, or de-icer. So I'm going to take a look up there and see if I can see any sort of issues. All right, I'm up in the bog area, and there's the waterfall. So there's not really any issues over here. This is all pretty free-flowing. The issue, I believe, is up in here, because this is essentially a snow cave right now, because it goes up in here, and it's a little pool about right here, and this is completely covered over. So I think that the issue is underneath there. I'm going to have to open that up. This is kind of dangerous here, because I'm basically standing on something that I can't really tell what I'm standing on. I mean, I know what I'm standing on, but I don't know exactly where my foot placement is, and it's kind of teeter-tottering. It's like a lot of these rocks that are up in here, I can't really step on some of them because they would push the liner down. So it's kind of hard to do all this when the snow's covering everything. Just dig this away here. There is definitely a big chunk of ice here where the water's kind of squirting underneath. It's kind of formed this little icicle, I guess. And then everything else back here, yeah, I can't really tell what's going on. I can see the little stream of water coming in through here. But this is kind of what happened the last time there was something spilling over. What might be happening is there's probably ice going down into the water here, and it's kind of causing a bit of a barricade, and it's causing it to back up this way and then spill over the liner somewhere up in this area. But basically what that tells me is that I can't really leave this pond running when the temperatures are below a certain point. So once it gets down below the mid-20s and below that, I think there'll be too much freezing going on with how it's sitting right now. The main issue isn't really over where the intake bay is. The main issue is right now has been up here, because this is the second or third time now since we've had freezing temperatures and then causing this sort of ice damming up here where the water is coming out. All right, I removed the block of ice that was covering the stream coming out there. There's a little pipe. That's actually just the other end of a valve. And it's just spraying the water into here. And as I've said before, this is only about 10% of the water. The rest of it is going this way and through a tube and then down. And then it goes into another hollow tube. It's a half tube with perforations in it, 2 feet down. And it sprays water this way through that tube, goes to a clean out, which is what I'm standing on. And then the water percolates up through the gravel here for filtration with this biological and mechanical filtration. But this part here, that's just so that the water doesn't siphon out of the bog area, because this is higher than the pond over here. So if the pump shuts off, it will end up sucking the water out of the bottom of the bog here and then backflowing back into the pond up through the filter, and all the debris will then end up in the pond again, whatever's underneath all of this. That's what the clean out's for that I'm standing on, to remove all that stuff. But if the power goes out, even just for a minute, it will do that. It'll siphon all that out of there. So this has to be here. All right, here is what I've came up with to prevent the ice damming. I basically just took a piece of scrap 3/4 inch PVC and just pushed it into the valve. It's not glued or anything, it's just pressure fit. And then I got this piece of scrap, I think this is 1.5 inch, just flex tubing. I just had this laying around, I just cut a piece off of it. So all I'm going to do here is just slip this over that and then let it sit, and then that'll stay right there. So that way the water's not splashing up in here and causing all kinds of icicle stuff going on and making an ice bridge. And also, because the water was going this way, that's just basically building up more water in the pool here, because it has to go out this way. So by doing this, that'll take care of those two issues. And then on top of that, this will not inhibit the siphon, the anti-siphon, because this is all just loose, and this is down in the water. There's still air that can get in there, so if the pump did shut off, it'll suck air right through here, and then it won't siphon out the entire bog. Over in the intake bay here, there's one thing I'm going to do. There's this one little rock right here. As I've explained before why that's there. If you skip through the video, go back and watch it again. But this, I'm just going to pull this out, and then that way more water can flow through here, lower between the rocks, instead of having to ride over top of that rock and then possibly causing an ice dam and freezing. This is the heater, by the way. I don't know if I showed it up close yet. That's all it is. At this point, the heaters are going to get turned off, and I'm going to see if opening that part up is enough to keep the water flowing in without an ice dam, and we'll see if the part up there solves the problem where so I don't lose water anymore, basically. Okay, it's a few days later here, and we started out last night about 12 hours ago at about 13 degrees Fahrenheit, and then you can see now, currently in the morning, it is 9 degrees Fahrenheit. And it looks like a little after midnight, it went down to 12. So it's been that cold for quite a while. Let's take a look at the pond. Here's what it looks like. It is mostly frozen over. This is the most the pond has been frozen this season. And you can see the little tiny hole over there. The little tiny hole there where the aerator is, that's the smallest that hole's been. If it stays this cold for long, that'll actually start forming an ice bubble over it. You can even see here that the intake bay is frozen over, but the water is still flowing underneath the ice there. You can clearly see the bubbles going through there. And it actually looks like it's pretty thick right there. If I had to guess, that almost looks like it's about 1 inch thick between those rocks right there. And up here, the waterfall is still going. So a few days ago, we went up to 30 degrees, and this yesterday was actually about 80% completely melted. There was just a little bit of ice around the edges, but otherwise everything was completely melted. And then just overnight, with it being this cold, all this extra ice formed, and in the intake bay there, all at once. But that's probably partly because I removed that rock before, so all the water that was flowing over the surface stopped, and most of the water flow is happening down lower between the rocks. So there's a way less surface agitation on the top here, and that's what I think what made the ice form. Because this isn't the first time it's been around 10, 12 degrees Fahrenheit. It's just the first time that's frozen over top there like that, which I'll just have to keep an eye on that. And then up here, this is the first time I've seen the river up here frozen over. This whole top part is completely frozen. I don't know how thick it is, but the water's still obviously flowing underneath it. And then that little tube I put up there, looks like everything's still flowing out of there okay. But I'm going to have to keep an eye on this too. This could possibly form an ice dam, and then all my water could start spilling over the liner, and this could become a real problem. This is, of course, a test to see if it can actually handle a cold winter without causing any problems. And I still have the heater in there, but I have not had the heater on since the last part of the video when I said I'm turning it off. That's going to be off, and it's going to stay off until I actually need to turn it on for an emergency case. Looks like currently the water temperature is sitting at 32.2 degrees, 31.8, 32, 32.2, something like that. All right, it is now evening of the same day, and it's currently 16 degrees, and everything is pretty much the same as it was this morning, except for we just got a little bit of snow, and now the snow is covering the ice. But intake bay is completely covered and froze over. Little tiny hole where the aerator is over there. And then over here, the waterfall. This is pretty much the only way you can tell that the pump is still working, which I actually find kind of funny, because over here, that little pipe comes out from not under the ground, but out from under the water, in this case through the ice, and then it has an elbow and goes that way. And I just find it interesting how the water's still flowing through there, which seems to be without restriction, even though it's very cold. So I was kind of thinking that what it might have froze up with ice very slowly, like formed like an ice layer around the outside of it, but on the inside, and until it gets narrower and narrower and restricts the flow, which could possibly happen. But the only way I would know that for sure is if there was a restricted flow over here, if there's less water. Other than that, as I said, the heater is not on, or the de-icer, I should say. Not going to turn it on unless I absolutely have to. I'm just trying to see how long I can go without actually needing to do anything to this pond to winterize it. All right, it is now the next morning, and last night at around 7 p.m. it dropped down to 9 degrees Fahrenheit. It is now currently 10 degrees Fahrenheit, as you can see here, and it's been like that pretty much for the past 12 hours. And here's the pond. Looks pretty much the same as it did last night, except for the little hole over there where the aerator is. I think it's mostly iced over. I can't see much of anything going on there. And then, of course, the waterfall over here. It's still flowing, even in these cold temperatures. And it does look like, because the ice is forming right over top of here, that the flow is starting to become like slightly restricted. But as far as the amount of flow happening, it's about the same as it's always been, even though this is iced over and the tube is coming out of the up and exposed up into the air there. So there's still no restriction happening there. It seems about the same amount of flow as it always is. Now today, temperatures are going to go up to the low 20s, and then the following few days, it's going to be going just above freezing. I think one day is going to be like 38 degrees. And then after that, next week, it's going to go down to the negative temperatures, like -5, -7 degrees Fahrenheit. And it's going to be like that for a few days. At the highs, I think, aren't going to be very high, like up into the single digits maybe. So that's going to be the really good test for this. All right, it is now 2 days later, currently 25 degrees. This is late afternoon, and we've been going through a snowstorm all day. I think it's supposed to continue on through the night also. Pretty much everything is covered up in snow here. You can't see the ice anymore, but the water is still flowing. The waterfall is completely covered up in snow, but oddly enough, that hole there opened up today. That wasn't there this morning. So the ice actually melted there, and now all the snow is just falling into the water and then just flowing downstream. You probably can't hear the waterfall. I just placed the microphone down by the waterfall so you could hear it better, so I can prove to you that it's still flowing. All right, it's about a day later now. End of the day here, it's been 40 degrees most of the day, and also sunny. The area over there where the aerator is, the hole has opened back up, and it looks to me like the water level is sitting maybe a half an inch below the ice. So I may have lost a little bit of water, but it's not a big deal. And up here, where the bog area is, this whole stream has thawed out. There's no more ice up there. But what's actually kind of funny is that the water is flowing underneath the ice and snow here where the waterfall actually is. It's just kind of disappearing underneath there and flowing down into the pond. All right, another 24 hours later. Current temperature is 28 degrees Fahrenheit. It was about 34 degrees Fahrenheit for the high today for probably half the day. And most of the ice here is melted, especially over there, and the intake bay. Ice over by the waterfall is not melted. I suspect that probably won't melt because the temperature is going to be going down from here.
and it doesn't look like I've actually lost any water. There's a little line right here. There's like a little black line. It's still above that. That black line is what I would call like the normal level, and I overfilled it slightly. And I think the reason why it's still sitting there, because normally that's where it drains to, because out over in this area is where I have this spillover, and I think that's iced over on this side, so it didn't have a chance to really spill over that last little bit. So I didn't lose any water, so that's good. And we'll take the temperature just for the heck of it. It's like the water temperature is 32.4. All right, it's the morning of another day. You can see the sun is out, which is pretty rare for winter around here. It's 3 degrees Fahrenheit right now. We had quite a bit of snow last night. And you can see here that the water is still flowing into the intake bay. There's a little spot there where it's not frozen. Over there where the aerator is, there's a little hole still. And I can hear the water pouring underneath where the waterfall is. And then up here, let's take a look. Looks like a little bit of freezing right around here, but for the most part, this is still liquid water all the way up into the back there. All right, it is currently the next day, the next morning. It's 0 degrees Fahrenheit right now. It has been 0 degrees Fahrenheit all night long. Started out about 2 and then dropped down to 0. And then yesterday it was 9 degrees all day. So it's been very cold for a very long time now. This is all frozen on the top. The ice is probably pretty thin over here. It sounds a little thin, I guess. Maybe half an inch at the most. I can see the water flowing underneath there, actually. I wouldn't be able to show you on video. Pretty neat, like, ice formations going on right here. And then the aerator over there, that's covered over with a layer of ice. It's an ice bubble right now. And then over here, all this is completely frozen. But the waterfall is actually flowing. I can hear it under there, and I can see the bubbles right here at the edge. Looks like it's mostly frozen up there. I can see a little bit of water right over on the edge there that's still exposed and not frozen. I won't be able to test the temperature today, but maybe tomorrow or later on this evening I can do that. All right, it is now the end of the day. It's currently 5 degrees Fahrenheit. It went up to 10 degrees and is going to be going down to the negative temperatures very soon from now. I think bottoming out around -8, maybe -7 overnight, and then into the morning. Tomorrow morning's little video clip it should be around -8, and that's when I'm going to take the temperature of the water. I'll probably make a little hole down here in the intake bay. The water currently is still flowing. You can see a little bit right here maybe on the video. Still flowing. You can see it. There's ice, but it's still flowing there, and you can hear the waterfall maybe. Okay, it is the next morning, and it is currently -8 degrees Fahrenheit. Sorry, -9. It just showed up there. It's been like that all night. It's been below 0 degrees for the entire night. It's going to be below 0 degrees up until noon today. And then it's supposed to go up to like in the teens, I think around maybe 10 to 15 degrees. So it's still going to be very cold for a while. I'm going to take the temperature of the water here. I did poke a little hole in the ice over there. It's very thin still, actually. And the waterfall up here is still flowing, even though the ice seems a lot thicker than it was yesterday. I can still hear it. I'll let you listen on that in the microphone in a minute. Currently, the water temperature is right around 32 degrees. Now, these are probably going to be the harshest conditions this year. This is middle of January, and the temperature currently is supposed to be only go up from here, up into the teens and 20s from now on. There could possibly be colder temperatures in February and March, but it's not likely, and it wouldn't last for that long, not usually. So here's the waterfall sound. Still flowing just fine, surprisingly. All right, it is now the end of the day. It's currently 10 degrees Fahrenheit. It's pretty windy, so I apologize for the wind if you hear that. So this is kind of a sad moment, sort of, but also kind of one of those relief moment, I guess. So the water is still flowing. I can hear the waterfall going over there, and this is the intake bay. And one thing I noticed, that hole that I poked in there this morning, I could tell the water level is now well below that, and I can hear this weird suction noise. So I know the pond is right now, it's either draining, like losing water, or there's too much ice forming over here in this area, forming too much of a dam, and the water can't get into it fast enough. I'm not really sure.
I have to poke another hole on this side of it and check. But what this tells me is that I am going to have to run that de-icer / heater at this point, because it's not going to be warm enough after this to really make any difference in any kind of thawing. It's only going to get worse from this point, because even though the temperature is going to go up over the next week, it's going to stay pretty low for a little while yet, although it will be in the teens and 20s. So this kind of gives me the answer as what I need to do in the future. It doesn't necessarily mean I need to run a heater or anything all the time. It just means that I will have to watch the weather. So in other words, what I probably would need to do is I would attach the heater to a thermostatic switch and then have that control when a temperature gets down to a certain amount outside. So I would say anything below around 10 degrees Fahrenheit, the heater would kick on, and that should take care of it, really. All right, here is what the sound sounds like from the intake bay. You can hear that that's kind of like a suction sound, and it sounds to me like there's barely any water getting down to the bottom of the bucket where the pump is actually sitting. All right, I just confirmed here that the pond level is actually low. I knocked a hole in the ice, and it is a good 2 to 3 inches below the ice right here. So the water level in the pond has dropped. So I'm gonna have to turn that heater on to try to help with this and then add water. But for now, I think I'm gonna go ahead and conclude this video here as part 2. I may come back in another video that will not necessarily be part 3, but I might discuss something different, such as right now I can basically say that there's nothing I can do in this pond here, because what's happening is the ice up here where the water is, you can still see it flowing underneath there, and the ice here is getting too thick, and what's probably happening is there's damming going on here, and it's flowing over the liner on top. So at this point, there's nothing I can really do to this pond to change any of that. If I was to build a new pond, what I would probably do is I would simply I would make this deeper. If there was a bog area, I would make this deeper, and I would make the liner come up a lot higher so that it would give, so that the ice could get thicker without any spillage, without any spillover from ice damming. But that's all I'm going to say about that for now. I hope that was helpful. I learned something. I hope you learned something too. And then I'll see you in another video. Thanks for watching.